First off, I want to thank the grace of heaven and the virtues of the masters, the mercy of the grand predecessor, transmitting masters, lectures, everyone here today, for this opportunity to continue discussing this Heart Sutra. So last time we basically talked about the first, I guess these are the first three phrases, which basically make up the introduction. Okay, so the introduction also happens to be like the summary, I guess you can say, the summary or the theme of the sutra. This is actually if during like channelings, when Buddhas visit, or they channel in their visitations into like Dharma classes, and they can compose the marvelous scriptures. It's similar. They have a kind of like a preface or introduction in the beginning. That's the formal, part of the formal scripture that sets the theme for the rest of the scripture. And then, so it's kind of a similar thing. But anyways, so the basically you can say it translates like this. It says, Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara, while deeply immersed in Prajna Paramita, clearly perceived the empty nature of the five skandhas and transcended all suffering. Now, that's what it is. I mean, that's what the words say, okay. But it kind of like the subtext or the underlying, perhaps another meaning is it's telling us that we need to enlighten to the unrestrained bodhisattva that's within, okay, the Buddha nature, to achieve the perfection of wisdom through accomplished practice of profound contemplation and insight, to eliminate and perceive the emptiness of the five skandhas and to transcend all suffering. Okay, so so that's basically what we were trying to do. And then so last week we already talked a lot about the five skandhas, or kind of the workings of the five skandhas. Okay, so hopefully we all know or understand how that works. Okay. All right. So okay. So that's when we say this Ming Xing Jian Xing, and then and Jie To at the end. Okay. So this is really basically saying something similar, but this is very broad in general. Okay. I mean, this is kind of like the overall saying objective, if you will. This is what we're trying to achieve, right? So we say this sometimes, enlighten the mind and behold the essence, and then we can transcend all suffering. Okay, so but in the sutra, it's a little bit more specific, okay, about how we should do that, right? So this is kind of like a very broad thing. Now, ultimately, we need to realize the void nature, or the voidness, or however you want to call it. Or in the Sanskrit term is sunyata, okay, of all forms and consciousness, even our conscious mind, okay, is part of this, it has no true nature to it, okay, so this is all, these are the forms, and the consciousness are part of the five skandhas. So we have to realize that, okay. Then also, and to do that, right, we have to kind of eliminate ignorance, all right? So that's the basic thing. Ignorance, what we said last week, is basically giving rise to a thought. And it's all the stuff that happens before we actually even get a thought, okay? So, where our heart and mind is influenced, it's being affected by whatever it is that we are, that's coming in through our senses, okay? And that's affecting us. And basically, another way to say, ignorance is it's not just the differentiation. Differentiation by itself is not too bad, okay? But then the subjectivity is where the real problem is. Okay, so when we perceive things through our sensations, then we develop, or we have this subjective view of things. Okay, so because the subjectivity, it's basically, we have this ego. So that's the delusional self. And that's, so we have to kind of get rid of that. I mean, if we can't get rid of that, then basically we're still going to be ignorant, because we're still going to be affected by the conditions as they change. Okay, so, and then obviously, attachments, desires, all those things. So we have to get rid of ignorance ultimately to achieve oneness, or you can say suchness. Okay, so later on in the sutra, it's basically it's getting to that point. All right, so therefore, if we can achieve this oneness, the oneness also is basically the non-duality, the non-dualistic view. Okay, and so basically, so that would be oneness, and so then we won't have any wrong views. Okay, because we won't be influenced. Basically, in our heart and mind will not be aroused by the conditionality of the five skandhas and the subjectivity of our consciousness. Okay. So we try to treat everything as equal, right? The mind of equanimity, right? Do not take sides, right? That's the non-duality and the middle way. Okay, definitely, don't go to extremes, but also even right and wrong, try not to take sides. And we've talked about this in the past with Holy Teacher talking about that, right? Okay, so, all right. Okay, so yeah, sometimes we talk about there are like these three stages. Maybe I should have shown this like earlier, but the first stage when we say, the kind of the stages towards enlightenment, if you will. First stage is this is the typical sentient being, right? We're all sentient beings. We have attachment to form, where you say, I see a mountain is a mountain, and a river is a river. Okay, so that's what we learn, and that's what we know. And science can kind of tell us these things too. But for the most part, these are kind of definitions, right? These are it's just definitions. Now, the thing is, with our understanding of reality, right, it's coming only from our senses, right? So we believe that forms are the only true reality, but it's not. Okay, so now I think most of us probably, we believe in some kind of spirit or the soul or something, right? That's non-physical, so that's at least we're not totally in the materialism, okay, where it's just only the material existence, that's it, there's nothing else. So at least we have a chance, right? We have hope of becoming enlightened, right? So but basically, but we're still very attached to all the forms, to our body, right? To our possessions, things that we own, that we have, all these things that we believe to be very real. Okay, they are real in a certain sense, but the problem is we take them too seriously, or we put too much emphasis on them. Okay. So that's why in cultivation, we always talking about letting go of attachment. We try not to, be content, for example, right? Not pursuing all the material stuff more than we really need, okay? Because these things ultimately, it leads to, once we have an attachment, it can lead to stronger attachment, more desire for more, and stronger attachment, and that's basically slippery slope going down, okay, going down the wrong way, and it's just creating more karma. So basically, you have to overcome this ignorance, right, and delusion by eliminating the differentiation, subjectivity, and attachment to forms. Okay, so I mean this is what the sutra is basically all talking about. Now, yeah, so because we do live in an age of science, right, where if things cannot be proven by the scientific method, maybe it's kind of largely discarded, like because our instruments, they can detect things that have form. Then what we accept to be reality is limited to forms. But there's probably a whole reality there that's beyond forms. Okay. Now there is also a theoretical side to science, where many of the ideas and theories deal with more abstract forms, I guess. I mean, but they're still forms. Okay, so now so that maybe gets closer, going beyond the forms that we can see, but it's still not complete, right? In fact, actually, some physicists they kind of ask the question, or they're wondering maybe because in quantum mechanics there's this whole uncertainty principles and also the fact that and a lot of things point to perhaps this observer is very important. This consciousness, if you will, that's observing the universe. And so they ask, some of them ask the question, is the universe a projection of our consciousness? Now that's very interesting because that's kind of getting closer to what the view, the real view is, okay? Because we say that everything comes from the Buddha nature, right? Even this whole reality that we're in comes from the Buddha nature. Okay, so it is very getting close. I mean, they're talking about consciousness as opposed to Buddha nature. I mean, they still don't know about this voidness or this emptiness or this sunyata and Buddha nature. So they only still talk about consciousness. Okay. But still, that's kind of like going in the right direction. Now, okay, so if people take this view of having this attachment to the forms, then basically they'll indulge themselves and create more karma, right? Therefore, they will be caught up in samsara, right? That's the suffering and the cycle of rebirth. However, there is still a chance that they can change their view and let go of all attachments to achieve full enlightenment, right? So that's the potential is there, right? It's not that, because people are so attached, they're so delusional that they can never become enlightened. That's not true. And the reason why is because the Buddha nature is there, right? They still have that Buddha nature. It's just that it's just like, it's all covered up, so maybe like they have layers and layers of defilement, attachment, desires, everything covering up that Buddha nature, covering up the light of the Buddha nature. But it's still there. Okay, so that's why Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, they never will give up on their vows because they know that, well, as long as they have the Buddha nature, they can become enlightened, no matter how long it takes, however many kalpas or eons or whatever. Okay, it can still happen. Now you can say this view is somewhat similar. It's not exactly the same as what Senshu, right? Senshu, the senior disciple of the fifth patriarch, saying that, the Buddha nature is like a mirror that needs constant cleaning. Okay, so he's equating the Buddha nature to some form, and that it can be defiled, right? The dust can land on it, but it needs to be cleaned. So he's really not talking about the Buddha nature, though. So he's really talking about, you can say, the mind or the consciousness that can be defiled. Okay, so he, obviously the Senshu is not at that level of enlightenment. Okay, all right. Okay, so the next section, then it's basically Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva is addressing Sariputra, Selizi, right? And telling him, 色不异空，空不异色，色即是空，空即是色，受想行识亦复如是. Okay, so he's telling Sariputra that basically form is no different from voidness, okay, and voidness is no different from form, right? That in fact, form itself is voidness, and voidness itself is form. Okay, so I'm purposely not using the word emptiness, because emptiness, we tend to kind of use that to refer to just complete emptiness. There's nothing. Okay, just it's nothingness. Okay, so I use voidness here to indicate that it's not that emptiness. Okay, it's not. It's or sometimes we say true emptiness is is this where there is something. There's like the Buddha nature. Okay, okay. So and then it is the same with sensation, conception, volition, and consciousness. So therefore, what Avalokitesvara was telling Sariputra is that these are the five skandhas, right? The form, and then sensation, conception, volition, and consciousness. These are all they're no different than the void or voidness. Okay, so so this is let's see, yeah. And by the way, the Sariputra. Okay, so he is he's actually one of Buddha's chief disciples, initially male disciples, right? He and Moggallana, okay, they're two friends, okay, that joined the Sangha, and they became, kind of like the chief disciples of Buddha, okay. And Sariputra is known to be, he's like foremost in wisdom, so he's very, very way up there in wisdom, okay. Now, okay, so this is okay. So let's see. All right, so basically, to summarize this section here is saying that Sariputra. Well, okay. Form does not differ from voidness, and voidness does not differ from form. Form is voidness, and voidness is form. The same is true as sensation, conception, volition, and consciousness. Okay, so yeah, in this case, it is. Although Sariputra is being addressed here, this is also referring to forms, right? In general. Okay, so like Sariputta, his body. Okay, so the form aspect, form and body, and also really the conscious mind, the spirit, the mind, right? They don't differ from voidness. Okay, so that's kind of this other slight subtle meaning there, but everything else is the same here. So the thing is that they are not mutually exclusive. Okay, so because by saying that they don't differ, you can say that they're the same. Okay, but to say the same is maybe it's not quite right, but but they're not mutually exclusive. In other words, you can say that they're oneness. Okay, so that's ultimately that's what we're getting to, but yeah. So the problem is our view of reality is based on duality, right? We view everything in terms of duality. We say, oh, if there's form, if there's something, then it's not empty. It's not nothing, right? we say they are mutually exclusive. Yeah, it cannot be both form and formless, or empty or void. Okay, so that's our view, but that's the view of duality. Okay, so but the true reality is actually oneness, or suchness, and so basically you have to kind of be able to merge the two, merge that duality to become one. Okay, and that can be very difficult because it seems like there's a paradox, built-in paradox there, and that's what makes this whole thing, the idea of the Buddha nature or the Dharmakaya, Dharmadhatu, the voidness. So it's hard to grasp or really truly comprehend or realize that, because it's not in our everyday experience, right? Our everyday experience is based on duality. There's duality everywhere, okay, in everything. Okay. So you can imagine, right? So Buddha has certain. Well, there were a number of unanswered questions posed to Buddha. Okay, that he didn't answer. One of them was like, oh, is the soul identical with the body, or is not identical with the body? So it's something similar here that, well, it's not necessarily that the Buddha could not answer that. It's just that people won't understand the answer, for one. Okay, you say, oh, it's oneness. They both. I mean, it's not. You can say it cannot be described. Let's say 100% correctly in words. Okay, in our language, in our concepts that we have, it's probably there's no way to fully describe it correctly, to say it correctly. So that's partly why the question went unanswered. Okay. Okay. So given everything is empty, right? or void, right? So now we get to the second stage, which is kind of the opposite. So it's the duality, right? So one side is form, the other one's emptiness. Where I say, oh, I see a mountain, but it's not a mountain, and a river is not a river, right? You can say that this is partly, sometimes there's a saying, right? So a little knowledge can be dangerous, right? So sometimes we say, oh yeah, okay, so now we learned this. Wow, yeah, forms, they're all empty, it's void. But that's, if we don't fully understand it, it's actually not. It's not that. Okay, that's not really the truth. But when we believe that, then we go towards attachment towards emptiness. Okay, so this is basically we have an intellectual understanding of true reality, but not really. Okay, so it's still only half of it. We believe forms to be false and unreal, that only emptiness or nothingness is true reality. But that's nihilism, okay? So that's like there's nothing. Okay, so but that's not it either. Okay. So once again, we have to overcome the ignorance by eliminating differentiation, subjectivity, and attachment to emptiness. Okay, so this is just the other side, the other extreme, if you will, from attachment to form, and then this is attachment to emptiness. Now, so we have to be careful not to go to either extreme, actually, and where we reject the reality of forms and embrace emptiness or nothingness. Right, this is an extreme view, as it leads to the view that life is meaningless and there is no accountability for our actions. Right? I mean, if you think about it, well, I only exist while I'm alive, and that's it. There's nothing afterwards, so I can do anything I want. Okay, so that's dangerous. Right? So if people take this view, right, they will forever be caught up in samsara again. Okay, so so this is actually more dangerous than the attachment to form view, right? So now even and also so even let's say I don't take I don't take the view of nihilism, right? That there's nothing afterwards, there's nothing else. So even I cultivate, right? But I still have this attachment to emptiness, right? So even I can potentially become enlightened. And what we say is that is enlightened to the Four Noble Truths, and also to the links of dependent origination, to be able to overcome not create karma. one can become an arhat or a pratyeka Buddha, okay, but they are still attached to the dharma of emptiness. There's still some attachment to this either the dharma or this emptiness, okay. So that is not the ultimate, and that's according to Buddha, that would be like a dead end. Okay, so you cultivate, to such a high level, but it's a dead end. Okay, you can't become a true Buddha. Right? A Pratyeka Buddha, even though the title, it has a Buddha in the title, but it's not the same as a true Buddha. Okay, so I mean, it's known as a lonely Buddha. Okay, they're just by themselves. Okay, in emptiness. All right. But yeah, so that's not it. All right. So we shouldn't kind of go down that path. But I believe that most of us won't take this path. I mean, I think most of us are still attached to forms, and we wouldn't really have any kind of attachment to the emptiness. So we're not as likely to fall into this view, but that means it should be easier still for us to jump to the third stage from the first stage, right? So now, mentioned in the first stage, right? Senshu was talking about the Buddha nature as a mirror that needs to be constantly cleaned. The sixth patriarch, or Huineng, he kind of refuted Senshu's use of form and said that, well, there is no form. Okay, there's no mirror. There's nothing there to really have the dust land on, so it cannot be defiled. Now, the sixth patriarch was not attached to emptiness. Okay, so but he, and his view is actually pretty close to the true view, to true reality as well. So to the oneness, but he didn't really get to that oneness yet until he became truly enlightened when the fifth patriarch basically transmitted the Tao to him. Okay, so but we'll get to that. Okay, so all right. Okay, so so basically this is saying, the five skandhas are void, right? You have to realize the emptiness of the body and of all forms, right? Do not abide in the forms. Realize the emptiness of sensation. View all phenomena as illusory. So yeah, and then this is kind of like a chain reaction thing, right? So if you kind of cut off the first thing, or this, then the rest don't happen, right? So without sensation, there's no conception. Without conception, there's no volition. Without volition, there's no conscious attachment or consciousness. Okay, so obviously, if you can get rid of the first, get rid of. I mean, we don't mean that. I don't get into contact with anything. Okay, so again, this is all kind of in our view of things, okay, how we view things. Okay, so the five skandhas are basically conditional and devoid of self, right? Anatta, we talked about before, and their nature is void, or sunyata. Okay, so that is the ultimate, the true nature of things. The dharmas are a reflection, or you can say perception of the mind. So the dharmas in this case, we're talking about forms, okay, or all phenomena, right? And a projection or manifestation of the Buddha nature. Okay, so basically, this is, remember what I was saying, that the universe could be a projection of our consciousness, right? So yeah, similar thing. But basically, our mind, see how we view forms, or how we view everything, right, through our senses, it's really a reflection of our own consciousness, our own conscious mind. Okay, we tend to think of it in the other way around, that because I see something, then it registers as I see the clock, it registers as a clock in my mind, but the true that's kind of our view of things, sentient beings, how they view things. But actually, it's really a reflection of what's in our mind. Okay, so and it really is a projection of what's from the Buddha nature. Okay, so so the external reality is not a true reality. It's really only a projection and a perception on our part. Okay. So now, obviously, it takes a lot of diligent practice and profound insight, right, into the nature of reality to be able to realize this voidness of all these things. Okay. At the highest level of realization, right, the body is no longer a hindrance or obstacle. Right? Body and mind merge as one, and the mind is fully in control of the body. Okay, for us, we think, well, yeah, I can control my body, I can do things, right? But actually, we don't have full control of our body. So you've heard stories of how, whether they're immortals or bodhisattvas or Buddhas, right? How they can perform, seemingly impossible feats, such as walking on water, right, like Jesus, right, or traveling through solid objects, or underground. All these things. It's because they really do have full control. Their mind and body are one. Okay, they realized that oneness. Okay, it's not just intellectual, conscious realization. Okay, I'm talking about it's. This is beyond. I can't really say. I mean, because I haven't achieved that. So, but yeah, it's not just we just know about it. Okay, it's not that. I mean, they really. And it does come with a lot of practice too. Okay, all that, the cultivation, the practice has to go along with that in order to reach that realization. Okay, so so obviously, so this is it's in two parts. One is the knowing the concepts, the knowledge, but the other is really the practice as well to finally realize what those concepts really are. Okay, what they really mean in reality. Okay. All right. Okay, so yeah, we create karma and suffer due to our ignorance. Again, giving rise to a thought and the conditioning by the five skandhas, right? And believing that this is the true experience and reality. We can change this by changing our view or our mindset. We have to realize that everything is jnana. So we need to let go of subjectivity, duality, and attachment, desires. Let go of karmic affinities and not give rise to a single thought, right? So don't, I think, last week I said, our mind should never be moved or influenced or aroused. Okay, so now what that means is really, again, the subjectivity, it's mostly, it's due to our subjectivity that it gets aroused. Okay, so that the fact that we have that ego, and we have likes, dislikes, that duality, all that. Okay, so all right, so that's there's a lot of work that we have to do. Okay, all right, so that was that section. Now the next section is a bit longer. This again. Sariputra is being addressed, and this time it's talking about kind of more delving into the nature of this voidness. Okay, right, and it's kind of describing that that it's not all these things. Okay, all right, so. It says Sariputra 舍利子. Okay, so 四诸法空相. 不生不灭不垢不净不增不减. Okay, so this time when Avalokitesvara is saying Sariputra, it's also referring to kind of the Dharma body. You could say these are different terms for the void nature. Okay, the voidness. So the Dharmakaya or even the Buddha nature. Okay. And so now it's talking about the thing that has this is the formless thing. Okay, so and it says voidness is the nature of all dharmas, and so now so remember we talked about the sixth patriarch. He said this is where you can match it up to what's in the sutra here. Right? It says how amazing that all dharmas come from this self nature. Okay, this true nature, Buddha nature, or whatever. Right, that it's everything comes from it, right? Nothing exists outside of the Dharmakaya or this Buddha nature, right? Then there is no outside. There's no such thing as outside. Okay, what is outside of it? You can't even say that. Can't even say that or ask that. And also, we cannot quantize voidness or Dharmakaya or Buddha nature. Quantize. Okay, well, let me talk about this. All right, so first, this idea that nothing is outside of this Buddha nature. We always say that Buddha nature is everywhere, okay, and it pervades the entire universe, okay, but there's nothing outside of it, okay. So, right. So, I mean, if you think of like the human body, right? We have organs inside, muscles, blood, bones, etc. Right? There's nothing outside the body that is part of the body. Right, all the parts of the body are within the body, and they're all part of the body, right? So each of the organs also are not separate from the body. Right, the body is made up of all of its internal components. Right, this is not a perfect analogy, right? Because the parts add up to the whole. Whereas in this case, that's actually not the case. Okay, so I mean, it's in other words, that's the cannot quantize part of it. Okay, so another way to try to think of this is when you close your eyes, right, and imagine that nothing exists outside of your consciousness. Let's say you close your eyes, like whether you're meditating or whatever, or maybe even sleeping or dreaming, right? There's, for all you know, there's nothing beyond what's in your mind. Okay. Now, the only thing that exists are within your consciousness, right? There is nothing outside of your consciousness, right? By definition, you can say there's nothing else, because anything and everything that appear in your consciousness is still within your consciousness. Okay. Now, in terms of that being able to quantize or not being able to quantize is like to count or to be able to quantify something, right? We can quantize or quantify forms, right, like matter or energy, because we can measure them, right? Now, but how do we quantize or quantify voidness? Right, we can't. So think of voidness, Dharmakaya, Buddha nature. You can kind of think of it as being infinite or infinity, right? Because no matter how you subdivide it, the result is still infinite. Right, so we know, at least in math, right? If you have infinity, you divide it by any number, it's still infinity. Okay. So with our consciousness, right, we can imagine anything, even infinite space. Right. The only way our consciousness can contain infinite space if it is also infinite. Okay. So again, maybe it's not a perfect analogy, but I think maybe you get the idea that. This it's hard to, because we cannot quantify or quantize this voidness or this Dharmakaya. We can't say, oh, how big it is, or whatever. We can't really measure it in those ways, and so that makes it more difficult, okay, for us to try to understand. Okay, all right. So so then it goes on. Okay, so it's not created or destroyed, right? So then this is, sixth patriarch again. When he was enlightened, he says, "Wow, how amazing that self nature is unborn and undying." Okay, so basically, the voidness, the Dharmakaya, the Buddha nature, it always was, is, and always will be. Okay, so it's just there. Okay, it's Bako Bujing. It's neither impure nor pure. All right, so. Sixth patriarch said, "Wow, how amazing that the self nature is originally pure." Now here, you might say, "Well, original pure, and we're saying it's not pure. Actually, this is a problem with language. Okay, so but really, I mean, what he really means is that originally it's in this. We call it. We don't have the right word, unfortunately. It's a pure state. Okay, and but that pure state never changes, right? No matter what happens. So even though we have the Buddha nature, we can become impure, right? We can become defiled, but it's not the Buddha nature. Okay, that nature or that essence does not become impure. All right. So basically, since it cannot be defiled, then there's no need to be purified either, right? It just is the way it is. Okay. And so, right? So it doesn't increase nor does it decrease, right? So Sixth Patriarch says how amazing that self-nature is inherently complete, right? So nothing else exists, and there's also nothing to gain, nothing to lose, right? Right? If there's nothing beyond it, then everything is contained within it. So obviously, it cannot get anything from the outside, right? And it cannot lose anything to the outside. And to say, oh, okay, well, maybe what if it increases, like it gets if there's more of it or gets bigger? We can't say that. Again, that's quantifying it. Okay, and we can't quantify it, right? So, all right. So it's basically it's complete. It's self-contained. It's complete. It doesn't depend on anything else, right? So let's see. Yeah, so because it's the ultimate source of everything, right? It cannot have any external dependencies, right? There's nothing that it can get from anywhere else because there is nowhere else, right? And it cannot lose anything either because it is completely self-contained, right? Okay. Okay, so this summarizes this part here, right? So this says Sariputra, the characteristics of voidness of all dharmas are non-arising, non-ceasing, non-defiled, non-pure, non-increasing, non-decreasing. Okay. Also, or you say that all dharmas or forms, phenomena are void. They arise from and are the Buddha nature, Dharmakaya, which is one with voidness. So I mean, this is everything is it's all part of it. Okay, it's all part of the same thing, if you want to put it that way. It's hard to really use the right words to describe it, but that's kind of as close as maybe I can get, right? So it's basically, it's all pervading, everything contained within, nothing exists outside. Voidness, or does Dharmakaya, Buddha nature, gives rise to form, and form is voidness, okay? Because when it gives rise to it, then obviously you can say it is a part of it. Although you might say it's like a derivative, but it's more like a transformation, I would say. Okay. So now, however, as mentioned before, it's not really the exact relationship. Say, that one is equal to the other. Another way to think of this is like the universe, right? So we say it's expanding, right, based on our observations. But the thing is, we can't see the edge of space, right? So does space even have an edge or a boundary or a limit? We can't answer that question, right? We cannot really say that space itself is actually getting bigger. It could all be an illusion, right? So in our consciousness, we have a concept of space, and that space is expanding. However, this is still contained within the mind and Buddha nature essence, which is not expanding, right? So it is like it's kind of like a simulation, like in the Matrix, right, of the universe, in which the universe is expanding within the simulation, but the simulation itself is not expanding, and it's unchanged. Okay, well, all right. So, but anyways, that's let's try to understand that. Okay, so okay, so Right. So this is where, you get to the third stage of the realization of oneness or enlightenment. So this is where I see a mountain is still a mountain and a river is still a river. Actually, that's the way I think it's said, but I would say it's actually a mountain is a mountain, a river is a river. Because when you have the I see, there's still subject-object duality. So actually, at this stage, there is no subject-object duality. And so it should just be a mountain is a mountain, a river is a river. It's just suchness is basically what it is, right? So we have to realize, through a lot of practice and insight, that the forms and emptiness are aspects of the oneness or suchness of sunyata and the true reality, right? So, at this point, we have there's no such thing as attachments, no duality, no subjectivity, no ignorance, right? And we just follow the Buddha nature, okay? So we just follow that suchness, if you will. We just do things according to that suchness. All right, so this is, so how we get there is kind of follow the middle way, because remember, the first two stages are kind of duality. It's like one side or the other. And so we are supposed to, we shouldn't go one side or the other, right? We go in the middle. And try to realize, but at the same time, we also have to kind of get rid of that idea of duality, right? To arrive at that oneness. Okay. Let's see. Okay. All right. Okay. So basically, Buddha nature, voidness, form is the oneness or suchness, the absolute reality of Dharma Dhatu. Okay. Now I'm going to show you something that you're probably familiar with, but maybe you didn't see it in this from this view. Okay, so basically, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Right? He was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So this is in the New Testament Bible. It's Book of John, 1 through 5. Okay, so this is basically, he's saying the same thing. He's talking about sunyata. Okay, so basically, okay, there's you can see the parallels here, right, between what John is saying and also what the sutra says. There's the equivalence of form and void, and basically John the Divine saying there's equivalence between Word and God. Now, I guess, he's known as actually John the Divine, so maybe that's for good reason. He must have had divine wisdom, right? Now here it says in the beginning really, there is no beginning, okay? Unfortunately, our words kind of fail us here. The language fails us. We don't have a word for the beginning that has no beginning, okay? So, but same thing, it has no beginning. It's interesting, the word actually, I don't know what the original, the term that was used in the original language, but like in the Greek translation, it's logos, which is actually knowledge, or some kind of knowledge. But anyways, so the word, it's interesting how he says this, and this points to that basically not the duality, but the oneness of these two things. Okay, the Word and God. Okay, so it says the Word was with God, and then the Word was God. So this is kind of a weird way of saying things, but it's really saying the same thing that we're talking about here. That form is void and void is form. Okay, so he was with God in the beginning. All right, so through him all things were made. Just like we say, the Buddha nature creates, everything comes from the Buddha nature. So this is what the same thing, saying that the Word, everything comes from that. Right? Without him, nothing was made that has been made. Right? In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. So you can say, again, that's Buddha nature giving life to sentient beings, to all beings, okay? The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Okay, so basically, you have the two aspects of reality, and whether it's the empty nature and the void or whatever, but they're really one. Okay. And it's okay. So the thing is, we might see only like one aspect of things at any given time or place, but we don't see the two aspects as one, right? We don't view it that way, because we kind of see things through the lens of duality and subjectivity. So that's really where the problem is. So we have to correct our view, right? So that's what Buddha starts with, getting the right view. And so we have to kind of discard the view of duality and also the subject-object subjectivity, okay? And so, all right. So, once, when our view is wrong, then our view of reality is wrong too. Okay, so now, okay, so basically, you say God and Word. In this case, you can say, well, you can say it's it's whether it's the Dharmakaya voidness or the forms, whatever, right? Light is Buddha nature, is life. Okay, the darkness, it can be interpreted as a number of different things, whether it's duality, forms, ignorance, evil. Okay, it depends on what level you want to talk about it at. Okay, all right. So, so basically, all right. So we look at this example, right? The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Right? Light and darkness, actually, they coexist simultaneously. Now, now I hear you say, well, how can light and darkness, coexist at the same time? Right? We all, in our everyday experience, we know we enter a dark room, right? It's dark, there's no light. And then we turn on the light switch, and then suddenly there's light, and then there's no darkness. Okay, it's either one or the other. Okay, well, now you might have like a dimmer. Okay, so it's like, but that's the degree of light. Okay, so I'm not talking about that. All right, so I'm saying basically that light and dark and what we call darkness can exist at the same time in the same place. Okay. For example, if in the darkness of space, right, we look out in space, see, well, in a nighttime sky, it's black, right? It's very black, except for when we see the stars or planets. But do you realize that space, even though it's black, is filled with light? Okay, light is actually passing right through all that empty black space. The only reason why we don't see anything, why it's all black, is because, right, if there's no form, then we don't see anything, right? It's empty. But the forms, they can exist in the darkness, but can be seen in the light. Okay, so there might be things out there that maybe if the light is not shining on it, then you don't see it. Once the light hits it, then it reflects the light and it hits our eyes, and then we see it. Okay, but actually, in space, it's full of light. It's just that there's nothing for it to reflect off of, and therefore you don't see it, unless, of course, you look directly at the light source. Okay. Now, let's see. Right. Yeah. So you can, you can turn to the source and see the light. Okay. So, there's actually something called Vanta black. Okay. I don't know. So some material. Okay. That people created, and it's like super black. Okay. So it's like 99.9% black. And if you paint a room with this black Vanta black, right, and let's say you stand inside, you seal it. Okay, it's just pitch black, right? And then you can shine a light in there, and you still won't see anything because there's no reflection. Okay, so it's kind of like that. But yet, the light is still there. Okay, the light is there, right? You turned on the light, but there's nothing to see. Okay, or I mean, there's no light reflected, so you don't see anything. Okay. So I'm just trying to use that as kind of a way to kind of understand that, let you understand that yes, these two things can coexist. Okay, so when we're talking about voidness and form, right, they can both exist at the same time, right? It's just that maybe we don't see it necessarily or see it that way. Okay. Now, let's see this. Okay. All right. Whoops. Oh, okay. Oh, all right. I'm just another example. I mean, yeah. So what kind of maybe what John the Divine was talking about more is like the light that shines in the darkness, right? So basically, you could say that in this case, the light is, it's like the Buddha nature it's everywhere. Okay. So just like I said, the light is throughout all the space. Okay. Now, obviously, light gets blocked by objects, so that was not a perfect analogy. But in this case, the Buddha nature, or even voidness, emptiness, is everywhere. Okay, even in what we consider to be solid objects. Okay, it's there. Right. So there's nowhere that it cannot be found. Right. But here, okay, so I'm saying, oh, darkness is ignorance. Okay, so and the light, you can say ignorance or whatever. And light is Buddha nature or enlightenment, right? So light and darkness actually coexist simultaneously. They both have the same source, right? Coming from the mind in terms of enlightenment or not, right? The difference between an ignorant mind and an enlightened mind could be in the span of a thought, right? So it depends on what's going on in our mind. It's almost like flipping that switch one way or the other, but yet, they're both can be there. Okay, it's just that which one is I guess visible. I guess So what we want to do is shine the light of wisdom on the darkness of ignorance. Okay, so so I think ultimately, right, since John said, the darkness has not overcome that light, even though things may seem dark. Right, we see evil exists in human hearts and minds. We see a lot of bad stuff in the world, but there is still the light. The light is still there, right? The Buddha nature is still there, and therefore there is always the hope of, you can say, salvation, okay, in the end, hope of enlightenment, okay. All right. Okay, so... all right, so oneness, it's the oneness of everything, right? We talk about essence and function, right? So the sunyata, or the void nature, voidness, and the Buddha nature. Now, I'm not going to say that, which one is essence and function. It's just that this is really, they're the essence, okay? And through some function, okay, there's or you might say, maybe a transformation of some kind. Form comes about, is created, can be created. Okay, and so so basically, it's kind of like this: the void nature, right? It encompasses everything. I don't want to really say that this encompasses the Buddha nature. I mean, these two, the void nature, Buddha nature, are really. They're one, okay. They're really you can't say that one is more than the other, okay. But the forms definitely are come about through some function or transformation, right? Okay, so and so it's just like when we have a still mind, a quiescence, right? That is like the essence, this void nature, the Buddha nature, okay. And the active mind is the function. Right, that generates the thoughts, which are the forms. Okay, so something similar to that. All right, let's see. Yeah, now a simple and so all of this, none of this is really you can't separate these. That's why I say, form is void, and void is form. I mean, how do you separate? You can't take the form out of here. It's within this, so you can't remove it from there. So if you can remove it, then yeah, you can say, oh, they're separate, but they're inseparable, okay, because it's all contained within this, right? And therefore it is this. In fact, the form could be as much as, well, again, that's quantifying that, but we can't really quantify it. So, but anyways, it doesn't matter. The form, maybe it's easier to think of it as there is some kind of a transformation that can occur, that Buddha nature or void nature produces form, and then form returns back to that void nature or Buddha nature. Okay, so just like the law of the thermodynamics, where the energy is the total amount of energy is preserved, never, it doesn't increase or decrease, right? One is just that you're transforming from one form to energy to matter, that way. Okay, so it is kind of similar. So I mean, if you look in nature, you will see these are like hints at the true nature of things. It's just that when we get stuck on those specific the instances, okay, the manifestations, then we don't really see the true reality. Okay, so we're only stuck on those, right? And another maybe not so great analogy is to say that sunyata, Buddha nature, right? They're kind of like two sides of the same coin, or even with form. Okay, so they can't be separated, right? So the use of the coin, right, its function, right, then produces the forms, or is the form. Okay, so that's kind of maybe a slightly another way to look at that, right? Okay, let's see, where are we? Okay, all right, let's just go to here. All right, so okay, so then sutra goes on. The voidness, or Dharmakaya, has no form, right? The true form, this is the true form of the formless, right? There's no sensation, conception, volition, consciousness, no six sense faculties, no six sense objects and forms, right? So again, this is referring to like the skandhas, without the subject-object duality of sense faculties and objects and forms, then there is no consciousness of the six sense faculties. Okay, so that, again, this is kind of an expansion of the previous, what was said previously, and so in kind of like breaking it down into its components, but it's basically, it's saying the same thing. Okay, now, so therefore, in this void, or this Dharmakaya, Buddha nature, right? There's no form, sensation, or this is our view of it, right? The conception, volition, or consciousness. There's no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, or mind. No form, sound, smell, taste, touch, or mind object. No realm of vision, up to and including no realm of consciousness, right? So this is all talked about in the five skandhas. See, right, so without the subject-object duality of sense faculties and object form, then there is no consciousness, six sense faculties. So that these things are basically, everything is dependent, right? So later on it gets to the dependent origination of how things come about. They depend on something else, right? They originate because of the condition of some kind of dependence. So they don't exist, again, it's all anatta, right? They don't exist by themselves, right? There's no essence there. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Okay, I'm getting to this. All right. So basically, the six sense roots or faculties, right? Those are our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Then we have maybe this this could be like maybe the brain, I don't know. But six sense consciousnesses, right, that correspond to each of these, and then also the six defilements, right, which are when we see things, right, through our sight, we hear things, sound, smell, taste, touch, and the dharmas are mental objects. All right, so these Now, this is what causes the problems, okay? So when we combine these guys together, okay, so basically in Buddhism, they say, well, there are 18 levels of hell, and it's because of these 6 plus 6 plus 6, okay? So 6 sense roots or faculties, 6 sense consciousness, and 6 defilements or objects. When combined, that gives us 18 levels of hell. Right. Now, it's basically, this is leading to, having subjectivity, attachment that lead to delusion, desires, craving, karma, and sins. Okay, so ultimately, so that's what leads to hell. All right. Now it's interesting in the Bible. I think it's in Revelation, right? There's the number 666, known as the number or the mark of the beast. Okay, so that's considered like the devil. Okay, so who is the devil, right? It's basically the ignorant and delusional consciousness, right? So who has this number or mark of the beast? Actually, all sentient beings do, right? We all have it. It's not to say that there isn't a there isn't a devil, but but we all have the devil within us. Okay, so as long as we are subjective, we are attached, we deluded, have desires, create karma. Then we have the number of the beast with us. So we're attached to these senses, right? Okay. But ultimately, what we need to do is transform these 6 consciousnesses into wisdom, to transform hell into heaven, right? So it's because of our consciousness, these consciousness, that we produce these levels of hell, and therefore, if we don't want to go to hell, we have to transform the consciousness into wisdom. Okay, right. So again, the saying that heaven and hell are in a span of a thought, right? It's created in the mind, actually. Okay, so part of the practice of cultivation, is to, so this is probably a major part, is that we have to let go of attachments, reduce our desires, even if we cannot fully realize sunyata, at least we can reduce the planting of karmic seeds. Okay, so the realization or practice of the 4 normals, right? The what's routine, what's commonplace, what's plain, and simple, and what's genuine or sincere. Okay, it's in everyday life. Okay, it's just very being very plain, and so we don't place too much importance on material things or on anything really. So practice the precepts and discipline, such as the 4 proprieties, to avoid temptation as well. So again, all these practices, you can say they're all necessary. They're all needed to, and they work on various parts or aspects of trying to achieve that oneness. Okay, so don't think that I'll just do this one thing, this one practice here, and that's good enough. It won't be unless you can really do it to the highest level. But who can do that? So we should just do our best in cultivating in all the practices that certainly the 6 paramitas and everything else that we talk about in terms of cultivation. We should try to we need to practice. We need to work on those. Okay, because just using our intellect, our ability to think, our consciousness, we're not going to be able to realize oneness, okay, or suchness. All right. Okay, so actually, because of the time, actually, I think we'll stop it here, and then we'll kind of continue, and hopefully we'll be able to finish this next week. All right. If I had said anything wrong or not satisfactorily, I asked the Buddhas for forgiveness, and I also asked the transmitting masters and lecturers for their corrections. Thank you.